Rece Davis, the host of College Game Day, joins us now from Houston, fresh off handing that trophy to Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. And Rece, I want to start with the man we just heard from. Penix was brilliant this year. Nobody threw a better deep ball, and those 20-plus yard completions were kind of the calling card of that Washington offense. They did not happen tonight. What largely prevented that in your estimation?
I thought it was pressure from Michigan's defense. Now, they didn't sack him a lot, but they disrupted him, and I thought they got him going a little fast. And I think there was also a little bit of frustration, Scott, because Mike missed some balls early that he typically does not miss. There was one in the end zone just to my right here that Odunze had a chance to make a touchdown grab, and he didn't throw the best ball. He had another one wide open on a busted coverage from Michigan, and he just missed him. And, you know, there were a few of those. They also had some drops, and I think he started pressing a little bit. Even when they got back in the game, he never really seemed to find a great rhythm. I think that was mostly due to the pressure that Michigan was able to get on him, really mostly without blitzing, too.
It was choppy at times, which you understand given the stakes in the stage, and also the fact that both these teams are really good and those defenses are fighting for their championship lives, if you will. I wonder, did you ever get the sense that when Washington had the ball down 7, I kept waiting for that big play, especially with Odunze. I kept thinking it was going to come. Michigan's defense just wouldn't happen. I'm just curious, you're in the building, if you sensed it was coming or did not feel that.
For a long time, I didn't think it was going to. And then in the fourth quarter, when they made the play, and then it got called back for a holding penalty that, you know, might have been a little ticky-tack, that was the time you thought, okay, here it is. We're going to have a finish here. Prior to that, it felt not as dominant, really, as the Alabama game, even though Alabama had the lead in the fourth quarter. But it felt like Michigan was in control of the game, but the lead wasn't as big as it should have been. And so I really felt like that Michigan never really lost control of the game. The only little glimmer was when that one ball was hit down the right sideline that got called back, and it really proved to be a pivotal point in the fourth quarter.
Without question, and as I mentioned when we did the highlight earlier, particularly given that there were, I mean, you can always grab those still shots on Twitter that aren't always the best, most instructive, but there are a lot of people talking about the holds on Michigan's O-line that weren't called. But Michigan's O-line deserves a hell of a lot of credit. And something you and I talked about in advance of this game. Washington had won the award as the best O-line. What kind of statement does Michigan make about what they had up front when they run for 300 plus?
Well, they dominated the line of scrimmage on that side, Scott. They had 2 running backs go over 100, first time in a championship game since the 2010 for the 09 season. Washington has had trouble in that regard over the course of the season. Washington ranked pretty low in the country in missed tackles. They gave up a lot of yards over the course of the season on first down. You know, this was not an elite run defense, and Michigan knew that was a strength, and they played to it. He said, but when that happened and Zach went down and they scored on the next play against Ohio State, it was as if the offensive line really took that to heart and knew that what he'd been telling them was going to come true, and they drew a lot of confidence from that.
We're just crossing over midnight East Coast time. We will be with you for another hour. Michigan has knocked off Washington. The margin in the end a little larger than most of the game was played. They win by 21. You and I were talking off air, Rece, about if you can tackle and block and run at an elite level, you can win still. I was talking to Herbie and Fowler about this. The game changes, but if you're great at that, you can still win. But it's interesting. Not every team that's great at that always stays true to that identity. I'm impressed at Michigan's ability to say, you know what? We're not going to try to play the way you play. We're going to play the way we play. That doesn't always happen, does it?
It doesn't, and that's a great point by you, because a lot of teams try to do it when they can outmuscle or outman, or their opponent is overmatched. But when they meet a peer or a team that's their equal, the biggest games within their conference or in the postseason, sometimes it's as if they get a little skittish about it and they start trying to play the way the other team does. Harbaugh did a little bit of that early in his career in terms of trying to open up the offense, and instead went back, made the changes on his coaching staff, went to to Sharon Moore as the offensive coordinator, including the offensive line coach. He's done a brilliant job. They won the Joe Moore Award the 2 years prior to this, and they stayed true to their identity. The only time I even thought they wavered from that, Scott, was late in the first half. They had the big lead, and I was like, I think I would go with the Penn State game plan where they ran the ball 32 times in a row or whatever it was. And, because they were really running the ball effectively. But I agree with you. Michigan has done an exemplary job in saying, okay, this is how we're going to play. We could get veteran offensive linemen, supplement it through the transfer portal. This is our identity. This is how we're going to play, and it turned them into champions.
Indeed. I was shocked they threw it on 4th and 3. I figured when it was 4th and 8 and they ran it to get to 4th and 3, I figured another run was coming, and it didn't work out. In the end, it doesn't make any difference. I'll close with this, Rece. Michigan accepts the trophy and the praise that they have earned. They are champions. Team 144, hail to the victors. No doubt, they're champions. But how do we, when the dust settles, appropriately look at the season in its totality and all that's baked into it and kind of frame the way Michigan should be regarded for all of what this year was?
I don't think there's an asterisk or anything of that nature next to this season. I do think that there will always be a subtitle, if you will, that, Harbaugh missed 6 games over the course of the year. There were a couple of things going on. There's still an ongoing NCAA investigation that doesn't have anything to do with, whether players were eligible to play in this game. So I think ultimately, as time goes on, they'll just be regarded as an undefeated champion, but there, in some quarters, there will always be a little bit of a subtitle. And one other thing I think about that is really important, Scott, is that I think Michigan needed this win. Not that Washington didn't, they certainly did, but for a program that has more wins than any in the history of college football. They really didn't have a lot of national championships in the modern era to sort of plant a flag that they were that they were not just a team that has compiled wins for well over a century. They are a championship caliber program. They proved that tonight by winning their first undisputed national championship since 1948.
Agreed. Well said, as it often is, Rece. Almost always is, I would say. I always get to the end, and I want to make this clear. Sometimes. I have such immense respect for your work, but even larger appreciation for your friendship. I'll talk to you soon somewhere, I hope, and stay well until then, Rece.